Okay, so I've set up the figures here in their 3 groups of 8, and I've obviously got the shields to the state that I want to get them ready for gluing on. So I'm going to do a couple of things. What you'll notice is on the back of these shields, well, I'll put the obviously the brown on and giving it a little bit of a planking effect, whether you like it or not. The jury's out, but it's there. But no, the most important thing is to create a key for the glue that we're going to use. So I'm just going to get a file on some of these just to allow us a little bit of space there for the glue to adhere to. So that's really just a question of getting hold of the shield and making sure you know which way it's going to face. So it's obviously going to face this way, and then I tend to put a little bit of a gouge here. It feels a bit sacrilegious because we're pulling back off the paint that we've spent some time putting on, but I'm going to do that for these ones. And then I'm going to go with a little Dremel for this guy. So what we're going to do is effectively a bit of this. I have to repair that. And because I want to make it slightly deeper so the glue goes into that section of the shield. Obviously just go careful if you're going to use a Dremel or something like that. There we go. I'm just going to do that. Won't bore you with that too much. I'm just going to go around all of these, getting a little bit of a key on the shields. What I'm also going to do is the same thing on the figure's arms, just to create enough of a joining point. You can get away without doing that, but you know, my experience is that the glue tends to just pull off the paint rather than provide that sort of solid foundation you might be looking for. So I'm just going to carry on doing all of that, and then we'll work out where the shields are going to sit on the figures. See you shortly. Right, so what we're going to do now is just have a little look at the shields. I'm going to turn them over and try and get a excuse me, let me just get some of that focus on the shields. There we go. Just to really get a nice balance across the unit. As I've said before, my gut feel is that the troops here in the sort of middle section with this heavy thrown weapon type arrangement would probably be the most likely to have these kind of shields. I'm still not keen on this one, I'll be honest with you. This one is probably one I may at a later date repaint, but I'm going to, for the time being, stick that one to the sort of rear. So I'm thinking maybe one of those, just let me work out in my own head how many of these we've got. So I don't want to put all of them on this unit, because, as I said, this type of shield is more associated. Sorry, let me just get this camera a bit better. There we go. This type of shield is more typical of a lower class individual, whereas the hoplite type shields traditionally were the more, well, the wealthier individuals and the panoply that they used to wear in terms of warfare. So just going to start moving some of these sticks aside, thinking a little bit about the variety in the unit, and I do want to spread out sort of general style so that we get so I basically avoid having all the same types of shields in one place. And I've decided I quite like this Gorgon now. I wasn't sure about it to begin with, but it has actually grown on me quite a bit. Let's move some of these off. So I just think proportionately what I might do out of these 8 is use 4 in this central section and get a decent spread in terms of colours. So if I use this one, because I'm going to put that to the rear, maybe one of the blue ones, a simpler design, and then maybe the red one, and then just for convenience I'll put these 2 to one side over here, these 2 over here. Then the white group, I've got 6 of those. I'll put that one to one side for a minute, and then I've got, roughly speaking, I've got, well, I think that belongs to that. I've got one group of 7, a group of 6, and again I need to chest check. I'm probably not going to give this guy a shield, nor this one. So I actually only need 22 shields. I have decided to give the musician back there a shield. So 2, 4, 6, 8 of those. I'm going to use those 2. That's 10. So maybe I can get rid of some of these actually. Maybe I can get rid of the one that I don't like. So I've got a 7 there, a 6 there is 13, 15, 17, 19, 21, 22. Yeah, so I can get rid of this guy and come back and use these. Okay, so I've got a 3 and a 2. So I think just to get a bit of variety in terms of the animal shapes, I might put those 2 there. I quite like the winged horse. You put that one over there for the time being. So I need 7 over here. I actually need 8 over here. So I might just do a 3 there. So we're 1 shy over here. I might take that one out because it's got the couple ready over there. Put in this one, I think. So 7. If I move this one across here, 8. Put this guy in the middle here. I'm quite fond of this, so I'm going to put him at the front in the middle, I think. So 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, on this group I only need 7. But it's important to try and get these red ones spread out a bit. So I'm going to have 2 over there. And maybe that's my groupings. 7 shields over there, 7 in the middle, and 8 over on the right hand side. So basically now it's just a question of trying to work out in my own head how these are going to be arranged. I quite like that sort of effect on this one, and just trying to get them differentiated. So all I'm going to do now is get some super glue. I tend to use the Gorilla Glue. Give it a shake. I actually store mine that way up just to make sure that the gel, and I always use the gel version, is basically aligned, ready to use. And I'll just put in a little blob on there like that. Sorry, I don't know if you saw that, just a little blob of the gel. And then I'll rest it on here. And actually, it's pretty good. What I tend to do is find some way of balancing them whilst their shield is gluing, and trying to keep them flat. That's that one done. I think I quite like that sort of effect over here, so I'm going to just do this one with that. And again, this is where having it aligned correctly bears dividends, because we're able now just to align that carefully. So I'm just going to pop another tranche of glue in there. Get this around here, glue that on. Whoops. And again, that's gone pretty well. so I might just leave that one there. So now that one's obviously the rear rank, that's the front rank. I've got to put this somewhere, so I think I might put that one over there just so that yeah, I think so, because it's that sort of style and that fits quite well like that. So again, I'll just take a bit of glue and just pop that on and hold it. So basically I'm going to work my way around these figures now, just making sure they're all glued, and then we'll come back and take a look. Thanks. So here we are with the figures having had all of their shields glued on. You'll notice that I think I've got a pretty good mixture in terms of spreading out the different types of shields. Obviously I've got quite a few with this white background, but I've tried to stagger them so they're not all close together. And I think just from tabletop distance, again, this is going to look really quite effective. Up close maybe that hasn't looked so good while I've been painting them, but generally speaking I'm quite pleased with the way that they've come out. And I think, if I'm quite honest with myself, the shields where I paint them and they don't go quite right, yes, I do repaint them, but also at times, you know, I just reach into the bits box and get some shield transfers out, and that's maybe be a bit of a cheat, but it's just a nice way of lifting them. But actually, as a unit goes, when these are all together, that's going to look pretty good as far as I'm concerned. So what I'm going to do now is, well, if I just show you a good example, you'll see here that on the edge, just where I've been a little bit less careful or maybe concentrate on the front, we've got this edging that I need to finish off. So typically I'll take a black to begin with, just to make sure I've got a good coverage. I'm going to go round, going to just get the brush, lay it along this way. Excuse me, let me just see if that will focus. Just lay it along, just gently dab it around, just get that nice and tidy. And then if it has got a colour, I'll put that colour on just to really blend it in. If we look at the back of the shield, you'll notice that from a sort of distance, hopefully that gives you a really sort of wooded effect, and it's not too garish, perhaps as it first looked. So I'm really quite pleased with the way that they've gone. And yeah, so that's the next job, is just to tidy up the edges. Then I'll put another coat of varnish over them, just a matte varnish again, just to check on a bit of progress. And then finally we'll base them up. See you shortly. Right, we're ready for the final bit now, which is to put them on the bases. So what I've done here is just to show you how I'm going to base these up. This is probably the last army I'm going to paint for WRG6. I've got quite a lot of them, but obviously they're not as popular as they once were. And to be honest, I need to do something different, different periods, etc. So there'll be more to come on this channel, which will be a little bit different. But as you can see, I'm quite pleased with the overall effect of these shields. I think they're looking okay. What is interesting though is we've got to fit these guys onto these bases. So this is where it becomes not just a question of trying to mix the shields up and, you know, the figure styles, but also making sure that we can position them within the context of the unit. And how we're going to do that is basically quite often a bit of a tricky thing. So what I normally do is just pull off the bases. So I've stuck them using white glue, and you'll see that it's left quite a bit of sort of residue left. There's two ways that I deal with that. I often get a pair of scissors, which I'll just retrieve now. So I quite often, as I say, use these scissors, and it's just a question of taking them, sort of scraping off the material like that. Sometimes it just comes off in one nice little piece. If like this one, it hasn't gone off too nicely, then I just get a bit of a file, and here I'm just using a Thermogrit file. Now, to be honest, I don't worry too much about getting all of that back to the bare metal, because quite honestly, if it's stuck that well that I have to file it off, as long as it provides a good key, I'm happy with that. So don't normally have the bases in the way, but this guy's going to go here, relatively speaking, on the unit. So that's pretty good. Do the next one. Peel it off. This one's a little bit cleaner. So I'm just scraping that off camera, but you can see that it's pretty much there or thereabouts. If I take that one, and this is where it becomes a bit of a challenge to try and work out how all these guys are going to fit, and make sure that we've got the right sort of positioning. Now, I can see already that the guy that's going to give me problems is this one here, because as you can see, the spear is quite far forward. Now, normally when I do that, I put them as an end figure, or maybe as a front figure, but sort of twist the spear, if that makes sense. So you can see that it's coming out to the side there. So I may very well end up repositioning him, but I'm going to continue with this sort of process. So that came off really easily. Excuse me. I'm just scraping it off with a knife, sorry, with the end of the scissors. So again, we've got to try and fit another figure in here. So quite often what I do, let's get rid of that mark there, is try and put one in front of the other or something like that. Again, a little bit constrained here, because what I'm trying to do with these ones is make sure that I keep the sort of varied nature of the shield designs, and I don't want them all clustered in the same spot. Okay, there we go. So now I think that will actually fit, if I'm not much mistaken. So what I'm going to do is just run and do the rest of these figures, pop them all on the bases that I'd like them to fit on, and then I'll come back and show you what sort of mess we've created. Okay, so here we are. They're all sort of cleaned up in terms of bases, stuck on. I've had to move a few of them around. I moved the end officer over here. I just couldn't get the rear guy to work with that sort of wide cloak obscuring the space. But pretty much everything else, if I just sort of pan in over the top, with me, it's a bit tight in there. These bases are 15mm frontage with a 25mm depth that I tend to use. It's supposed to be 20mm, which I think shows you the age of the rule set, in that you'd never do that with modern figures. Not really. So I add an extra sort of 5mm on each base, which doesn't really materially affect gameplay, but just makes it a little bit more comfortable. So the process now is fairly simple. Make sure you don't knock them over, because it's a real pain when you do, and I've done that a few times. But also I'll just have a little sort of look and see whether I can ease up some of them. Just make sure they're all sort of sitting without being sort of propped up by other figures, as it were. Make sure the spears are aligned. So I think that's pretty good. Now all I do really is take my Gorilla Glue, and again for me I use this this gel, the gel version, and then I'll start by taking off one or two figures, and I'll probably work this way up because I need to get to the other end, and I normally work from both ends into the middle, but I won't do that just because we're on camera. So I'm just going to give this a shake. What I also need to do is go and find my safety specs. I always wear safety specs when I'm using the gel, not because I expect it to squirt out, but because I find that the fumes are quite an irritant, and I would always thoroughly recommend that. So I suppose just a word on the glue before I start. I don't know why I use Gorilla Glue or super glue. Historically I used to use sort of PVA and such like. I think it was when basically I'd run out of PVA, I started using super glue, and I've never really gone back. Just go careful with the super glue, because as I said, the fumes are quite irritant, or quite an irritant. But also, occasionally, if you put too much on, they can whiten the figures. And I think it's something to do with the fumes reacting with the paint. But just go careful. And as I said, it's just a question really of trying to remember how you've got the figures aligned and how you're going to use them. And then being careful when you take out the ones that we're gluing in. And I like to make sure that I've got at least a few millimeters of gap between each figure, in terms of I don't want the weapons to be touching. So hopefully I'm doing the right job there. Make sure we've got a little bit of gap there. Come over there a bit. And again, if I don't like the positioning, I will just rip the figure off and start again before it dries too solidly. Whoop. That's a good point actually. Sometimes when you rip the figure off, you will need to look carefully at the basing and actually the figure's base to make sure that you haven't sort of misaligned it or left anything untoward on it. But I'm just off camera putting a little bit of glue on each one of these. So I'll just carry on doing that, and then we'll come back after the glue's dried. So here we are, everything's dried, and a really good tip is to make sure that it's fully dried before you start putting a brush or anything else near it, because otherwise it just picks up the super glue, then you've got a ruined brush. So two things are going to happen now. Some of you watch my other videos know that I tend to use this English uniform from Vallejo to put around the bases, so we're going to do that. But also I'm going to take a marker pen, and just to make sure that we don't lose sight of where we are with these figures, I tend to put a little indication on, and I'm not really doing that very well, but that says F1. So that's going to be the first position there, F2, and just F for front rank really. And mixing up the units is something you only do once after you spent all this time, you know, trying to put them together basically. And it is important to keep a record of it, because the chances are it may not fit quite the same way if you do get them mixed up. Oops, just putting B1 obviously on that one for back rank. B2, and again I'm probably going to put some steel base on the bottom of this steel paper, so I'm not bothered about making this too neat, just enough for us to not lose sight of where things are, just in case we do get them mixed up. So that's it, put all those general designations on. Now it doesn't matter what order I do it in, I'm not going to lose it. So let's take this end figure just for convenience, because it's nearby. So you'll notice that around the edge of the base you'll see a little bit of, well, just the bare metal where we've exposed it, pulling the base off and such like. Well, there's a bit more on there on the front. So this is a combination now of getting a brush to make sure that we get in and cover those up nicely, but also just generally going over the surface. This is going to be one of the simplest basing sort of processes I've followed up to now. And just for completeness, what I tend to do is run my finger down the side if I do go over the top, just to make sure. I quite like that sort of burnt edge, so I don't like to run the paint over. I don't know why, but I just think it finishes off the figure quite nicely. So I'm going to run round, making sure that we've got all of the metal covered, and that we've got the base nice and covered. And then, as I said, this is a really simple one this time round, because what we're going to use is a Jarvis sand and stone mix. Sorry, excuse me. Just to finish them off, and that will match in with the rest of them. So I'm going to carry on doing this, just getting the figures ready for action. And come back on the video shortly. Right, we've dried sufficiently, I think, for us to go and put some base glue on. So what I'm going to do, just to blend them in with the other group, and just as a reminder, this is what we're trying to match against, is use some Java Sand and Stone, which I've put into an old Citadel Games Workshop tub. And so what I'm going to do, I'll just move some of these guys back. Pretty much repeat the process we've just done with the paint, but with the basing glue. Now I've started to use this basing glue here, which is a War World Scenics. Now the one thing I really like about this is it's actually quite runny, and I think on other videos you've seen me sort of lift the lid off and then it tends to run away. Now I was a bit unsure about it at the time, but I quite like the fact that it is runny. It doesn't seem to cause warping on these sort of MDF bases that I've seen before, and you can sort of spread it quite thinly, but it's actually still quite good at gluing. And so what I tend to do is go a little bit around here like this, make sure you don't get it on the figures like I've just done. Then when I feel like I've got enough, put the lid back on. Then we'll get the same large brush that I used before, and then just pick the paint up, make sure we get into the nooks and crevices of the figure, as it were. It's really easy to put too much glue on, and I probably have done that on this occasion as well. So I'm going to do my best to smooth it around. Try and get into the gaps between feet and such like, but it's not a huge disaster. If you do overrun a little bit, it won't spoil the overall effect. But if I've got too much, I'll quite often just take it off and put it on for the next figure, and just make sure I get this nice and tidy. And then it's just simply a question of inserting it into the tub, giving it a little bit of a shake, and setting it to one side. And hopefully the video will come back. Yep, there we go. So it's basically rinse and repeat all the way through, just making sure we don't put too much glue on. We get into the sections of the figure that we want to. Oops. I'm going to stop there on that one because I think that's probably enough. Just make sure we get into the inside portions where the bases are. Sorry, where the figure's fixed to the base. Run around like this. And if you get a decent basing glue, it doesn't take much of it to actually give you the coverage, or the adherence and coverage combination that we're looking for. Just make sure I've got in here a bit. I tend to worry more about the edges of the round of the figure base itself, because obviously that's where you get the biggest height transition, and we don't want that to appear on our bases. So again, put that in there, give it a bit of a shake, and then put it to one side, put it over here. So yeah, I'm going to carry on doing those, then give them plenty of time to dry. So I'll give them overnight and join you in the video. Okay, so here we are, all nicely dried. Next step is very easy. Just take your pot, take one of the figures, tip it out. Now, quite often you'll get left with a line over the edge, which I'm just going to clear off here. Look. Most of the time you can do that with your finger, just rub it off, because as long as you haven't put glue there, it won't adhere. Now, occasionally I do get a bit of glue, and what I tend to do is take a pair of pliers, or something with a good straight edge, and I'll just rub down the edge like that, just to make sure. As I said, it depends on your aesthetics, if you like, or how you like your figures to be presented. I quite like this dark edging. On the table it pretty much disappears, but it just feels a bit cleaner rather than trying to have the sand or whatever flow over the edge, perhaps in an untidy way. So I'm just going to quickly run around knocking all of these off, making sure they're nice and clean. Doing the same thing to all of them. Then what I'll do is shake this board off that we're working on, because there are a few things, you always get a bit of grip there, but I'll shake it off and then line them up and we'll move on to the next stage. So welcome back. Here's the unit, pretty much finished. If I try and maybe just align it so you get a better view of the shields, that's where we are. And I mean, actually, what's the camera here? About 8 inches away from the figures, but it's a quite a good camera. As you can see, it's really picking up quite a lot of detail that quite honestly will not be present when you view that, as I am now, from about 2 feet away. The next and final stage for me is to flock the bases. So, sorry, just going to reach over. Just as a reminder, that's the sort of style that we're trying to emulate so that it blends in with the rest of the figures in the army. If I tuck that on the end, you can see we're not doing a bad job. These obviously, I don't know why I selected these. These are transfers that I've just happened to pick up one of the figures from the unit. When we're done, I'll give you a shot of the whole army, and you can make your own decisions about whether it blends in or not. But actually, from a historical perspective, the reds that I've put in here make them much more Etruscan in style, and I think with the combination of the Italiite shields, it's looking pretty convincing. And certainly when we look a bit later at the whole army again with this unit inserted in, I think you'll well, hopefully you'll agree with me. And to be honest, yeah, one of the things I was going to stress is that I find sort of preparing figures like this, painting, a very personal thing. If I'm happy with it, then it's fine. Is it nice if other people comment on it? Great. But actually, you're only satisfying yourself, really. So if you can do this to a standard that you're pleased with, in a style that you like, then you can't really ask for any more than that. So all I've got here anyway, just to finish off, is just a little tub of flock. And if we adjust back up again, I think this was the original that I used for these guys. As you can see, pretty good match there. We'll just put that to one side, and all I'm going to do now is take this unit, move it down slightly. I'll return to the basing glue that I had earlier, and we'll take a figure, and there isn't much on that, just to show you that I haven't really gone to town at all on these figures, just a light bit of green there just to lift up the overall base. It's done in a very sort of Mediterranean style, which is why I went for the Jarvis sand and stone in the first place. So if we just put that to one side, again, it's just a question of putting a random bit of glue in certain areas on the base, maybe there. If you've got too much, then don't worry too much about it. You can literally use anything. I tend to use a cocktail stick. Just give it a little bit of a spread out. And however random it is however random it is. And that's just the way I work. And I tend to take a sort of pinch of the material. And then I can just drop that on there like that. Give it a push. As I've said before, you can use almost like a flock shaker or something similar. It's okay, but it's actually very hard to do that and get flock inside a figure's base. And to be honest, 90% of the time you won't notice any difference. As some of you have seen, I tend to use some of the tufts for some of my figures, and normally, depending on the style, I would do that. Here I'm trying to blend it in with figures that I've already done, and that would just look silly because it just wouldn't blend. So again, it's just a question of trying to randomize where we put the blobs, if you like. Just think about having enough color to lift the base, but obviously without distorting the overall effect. And again, this is a really personal thing, and sometimes I've done this, perhaps even for a number of months, and then one day I'll pick up the army and think, do you know what, I'm going to add some color or change the flock a little bit and boost it. And as long as you do the whole, the army together, you'll never have I don't think you can ever go too far wrong, if that makes sense. And you can really sort of splash this on quite liberally. Again, all we're going to do at the end is shake it off and put it back into the pot for reuse a bit later on. So that's me. I'm going to carry on doing that. Then I'll shake off the residue and you can take a look at the finished unit. See you shortly. So final stage, let's just remove flock, or the surplus flock. So we'll get our box, raise the old camera up there, and we're just going to pick each one in turn. I always give it a bit of a tap, brush it off. Again, oh look, that's a good, I didn't even know we were going to be there, but if it's sort of caught on the edge there, just remove it. It shouldn't really cause too many problems. We can use our little metal files again. Job done. Put that to one side. We're going to do this one. Put that to one side. Work our way through these. Probably a good point to say here, I've just noticed that I've knocked the shield off of this, and that's obviously been a little bit too excessive with the handling. So these things will happen. Let's just get the glue, pop that guy back on. And actually what I should do is just take my file, given that it's done that, and just clear out the old glue. So I'm just scraping out any sort of residue there, because glue on glue again is not too great. And there was a bit of black in there, so I think, going back to my point about making sure that you've got sufficient contact points, this is the sort of thing that happens if you don't have good contact, because the figure can't adhere correctly to the shield. So that's, and all I've done is my normal sort of trick about holding it off screen and making sure that that dries. So we'll let that dry in its current form over there. Carry on doing the remainder, and then, as I said, I'll line up the unit properly, put it next to its colleagues, and then you guys can take a look and see what you think. So see you shortly. Thanks for joining me again for this final part. What I've done here is just to set up the figures in the army that this unit was supposed to be blending in with. So as some of you will know if you've watched the video, this guy here is the unit that I've painted with my own hand. Well, they're my hand painted shields. The ones to the side are the other Etruscan units that I did, and for some reason when I was in the mode of painting these, I think because I was in much more of a hurry, I've done those with commercially available transfers, and I think pretty much by and large they're all from Little Big Men Studios, but you're probably not getting the same sense that I'm getting because obviously I've zoomed in quite close. But if we were to look at these units from a distance, and certainly from the tabletop distance, if I zoom out, really I'm actually, personally, maybe I've got some rose tinted spectacles going on here, but I'm struggling to see how these look that different. I've based them consistently, I've painted them consistently. I'm pretty pleased with the shields that I've painted. If anything, this unit over here, because I've got more sort of geometric patterns, more, I suppose, less Greek influenced designs, they've come over as perhaps the odd unit out, which is quite bizarre really, because obviously these guys, when I look at these two together, you'd be really struggling to sort of determine that they were different units. So I hope you like them. Weirdly, I thought I'd just share with you this one here, this shield that I really wasn't sure about, with this green face that I've managed to create. Again, don't know what it's quite like coming over on the video, but that has turned into my favourite. So it was the one I was probably least enamoured with when I started, but it's turned into my favourite. So hopefully you found that interesting, and the series of videos that I produced gave you something to work with in terms of developing your own sort of styles and techniques. As I've said many times, this is about doing or getting an end result that you're pleased with. So this obviously wouldn't suit everyone, but for me, I'm really proud of the fact that I've been able to produce something like this that really I think you'd struggle, certainly as I say, when they're in company with other figures, to work out that these were the poor relation in terms of the hand painted version. And it'll always be something that's unique to you. So my advice is give it a go. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you like the channel and continue to watch. Thanks a lot.